The 27-kilometer black hull of the Iron Sovereign blotted out the stars, its power readings dwarfing the entire Gilded Concordance fleet by a factor of 12. Commodore Thorne stood on the bridge, his voice a low, jagged rasp through the comms. "We counted your rockets, Arbiter. You forgot to count the silences between the stars. The galaxy is full of things that go bump in the night, and some of us are the ones bumping back. If you want to see how deep the silence goes, subscribe to the Chronicle before the sensor sweep finishes." Now, let us look at the moment the leash was first offered. 11 days earlier, Arbiter Kalen had complained about the quality of the Terran synthetic tea, a mundane grievance before a monumental meeting. He sat in the observation lounge of the Crimson Reach, smoothing the silk glass fibers of his robes. To his eyes, the Terrans were a curiosity, a species that still relied on the violent combustion of chemical propellants to leave their gravity well. Their tiny orbital stations looked like precarious tin cans held together by hope and primitive welds. The Gilded Concordance had arrived not with a hammer, but with a scroll. Kalen watched High Commander Vane through the shimmering field of a holographic star chart. It was a simple map, depicting Terra as a lonely blue spark surrounded by the vast, unclaimed territory of the Concordance. To Kalen, the chart was a kindness, a visual representation of why the humans needed benevolent integration to survive the cold reaches of space. Vane was a man of hard angles and weathered skin who seemed more interested in the steam rising from his mug than the Arbiter's lecture on resource management. "We are offering protection," Kalen had stated, his 4 eyes blinking in synchronized boredom. "Your rockets are impressive for children, but the void is hungry." "I am intrigued by the timing of your hunger," Vane replied. His jaw tightened, a small movement that Kalen interpreted as fear. He requested 72 hours to deliberate with the Assembly. The Arbiter had granted it, confident that the live-fire demonstration scheduled for the following afternoon would settle any lingering thoughts of defiance. He spent the evening logging observations on Terran hubris, noting how they named their ships after ancient gods despite their inability to even warp space. The Concordance is a vast machine of many moving parts. To see every gear turn and never miss a transmission, you should subscribe and secure your clearance. The signal is only getting stronger from here. On the second day, Kalen stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the luminescent Grace. He watched as his fleet's primary lances converged on a cluster of asteroids on the system's edge. The rocks didn't just break. They vanished into ionized mist. It was a beautiful, terrifying display of a superior species' will. Across the void, Vane's face appeared on the view screen. He looked exhausted, the skin beneath his eyes dark and heavy. "Protocol 7 is active," Vane said, though Kalen assumed it was a plea for more time or a logistical code for surrender. Instead of a white flag, the sensors began to scream. A massive energy signature, something that shouldn't exist, something that defied the Concordance's understanding of mass drivers, ripped through the outer system. The stars themselves seemed to distort, pulled toward a singular, terrifying point of gravity. The void did not just scream, it buckled. Kalen watched the sensor readouts on the luminescent Grace scramble into nonsense as the darkness of the outer system tore open. Out of the fracture slid a shape that defied every law of Gilded Concordance physics. A jagged, obsidian mountain of a ship, 27 kilometers of cold, unyielding metal. The Iron Sovereign did not use a warp drive. It punched through the layers of the universe like a fist through parchment. Kalen's 4 eyes widened, his throat tightening as he realized the tiny chemical rockets he had mocked were a mask. A primitive skin stretched over a predator's skeleton. Around the Sovereign, the empty space of the system began to shimmer and pop. Hundreds of stealth vessels, hidden for decades behind sophisticated phase cloaks, bled into reality. They surrounded the Concordance fleet in a perfect, suffocating sphere of steel. Kalen saw the High Commander's face return to the screen, but Vane no longer looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had finally put down a heavy burden. Then the bridge of the luminescent Grace shuddered as the return began. The massive black hull of the Iron Sovereign blotted out the stars, its power readings dwarfing Kalen's entire fleet by a factor of 12. Thorne, speaking from that impossible dreadnought, let the silence hang for a moment before the ultimatum was reversed. The Concordance ships, once the apex predators of the sector, now looked like glass ornaments drifting in a storm. Vane invited Kalen back to the Crimson Reach not as a subject, but as a witness. On the station, the Commodore activated the holographic star chart. Kalen expected to see the same small blue spark, but Thorn's hand swiped across the interface, expanding the scale. The chart flared. Beyond the Gilded Concordance's borders, in the void reach they had thought was empty space, a sprawling map of war zones appeared. Thousands of red icons marked the graves of Star Eaters, cosmic horrors that Kalen's people had only heard of in ancient myths. For 100 years, the Terrans hadn't just been building rockets. They had been holding the line against the things that live in the dark. We didn't stay quiet because we were weak, Thorn said, his hand resting on the edge of the holographic projector. We stayed quiet so the rest of you could sleep. The Iron Sovereign turned with a slow, terrifying grace, its engines igniting with the fury of a dying sun, as it prepared to jump toward a fresh incursion on the galactic rim. Kalen stood alone in the lounge, watching the massive ship vanish into a tear in space. He looked down at the star chart, still glowing on the table. The holographic projection of Earth was no longer a lonely spark. It was the center of a shield, scarred and battle-worn, but holding. Kalen picked up his tea, now cold and bitter, and realized his species had never been the masters of the galaxy. They were merely the children playing in a garden while a Titan guarded the gate. The star chart flickered out, leaving only the reflection of the distant, silent suns on the metal floor. The guard at the gate has many stories left to tell, and the next one arrives at dawn. Why did the silent wolf choose to protect the sheep? Subscribe and ask the right questions before the next jump.